Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Matt Sprayer from the Ombudsmen Report, coming at you solo because our co-host, Bobby Juliana, is in New Orleans having a good time. And I just thought I would fire this up and maybe make a video. I haven't done one since last summer when I was talking about Turkey and Erdogan. Man, I think that needs an update. But anyway, I want to talk to you guys today about John Bolton and why I think John Bolton's appointment to the National Security Advisor is a bad idea. I want to talk about this because some people that I respect, Ben Shapiro, for example, has been talking as if this is a great appointment and we should all be really glad that John Bolton is now at the head of our national security. Insane to me. It just doesn't make any sense because this guy is a neocon war hawk. And so I wanted to sort of take some quotes from John Bolton and go through them about why I think he's a bad choice. And the first was his defense of the Iraq War. Not only was John Bolton in favor of the Iraq War in 2001, 2002, 2003, but the quote I have here from him is from 2015. Okay, so the Iraq War, at that point in time, you really shouldn't have been defending it, honestly. I was sort of an idiot. I used to like Christopher Hitchens. I still do admire Christopher Hitchens, but when I first got into politics, I found his defense of Iraq so interesting because Saddam Hussein is a terrible, fascistic, totalitarian dictator. There aren't enough bad words to describe that guy, but I think it's still safe to say at this point that going into Iraq was the wrong move, and it ended up with a lot more chaos than stability. And so if you remember, John Bolton was appointed to George W. Bush's Undersecretary of State for Arms Control and International Security in 2001. He stayed there for 4 years and so was there when the U.S. invaded Iraq under false pretenses before eventually being reassigned to ambassador to the UN. So this comes from a 2015 interview. Bolton was asked about Iraq and he had the following to say, quote, "I still think the decision to overthrow Saddam was correct. I think decisions made after that decision were wrong, although I think the worst decision made after that was the 2011 decision to withdraw U.S. and coalition forces. The people who say, oh, things would have been much better if you didn't overthrow Saddam miss the point that today's Middle East does not flow totally and unchangeably from the decision to overthrow Saddam alone." And, I kind of agree with Bolton that the Middle East does not flow totally and unchangeably from that decision alone, but it makes up quite a big chunk of it. I mean, at least 70%, if we're going to put a number to it? Let's just go through some Iraq War fast facts real quick. First off, this was an unjustified war that we shouldn't have been in the first place. Whether or not you think it was right or wrong, we really made up the pretenses to invade that country. The weapons of mass destruction bit was essentially debunked as soon as we invaded Iraq, and they were nowhere to be found. The second part that's always bugged me about the Iraq War is that it was a vindictive war. George W. wanted to finish the job his daddy, as he would say, didn't do during the first Gulf War when Saddam invaded Kuwait. Now, driving Saddam out of Kuwait sure was justified, but, Bush Sr. decided not to march into Baghdad in a decision I think really ruffled the feathers of some of the same characters that found their way into the war cabinet under W. For example, Dick Cheney, who was the Secretary of Defense during the original Gulf War, was eventually George W. Bush's vice president. Colin Powell was chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff the first time around, and then you all remember him being the Secretary of State, going to the UN and lying about weapons of mass destruction. Interesting. And finally, Paul Wolfowitz. How could we forget about him? He's so lovable. He was the Undersecretary of Defense during the First War and Deputy Secretary of Defense during the Second. In interest of time, I'm not going to go through the entire Iraq War. Maybe another time I'll make a video on all of these different wars, but just know that it was a failure. At this point, it's pretty safe to say hundreds of thousands of people are now dead because of that war. And partly because we went into Iraq not really understanding the socio-political arena we were getting involved in with the Shia and the Sunnis. We didn't get it, The Iraq War facilitated the rise of ISIS, guys. This is part of where it all starts. We, in an attempt to train rebel groups, end up training and giving weapons to the people who eventually become jihadists. We tried training the Iraqi military, remember? But they weren't interested at all. They weren't interested in fighting the radicals in Iraq. So when radicals start fighting, and the radicals, when they fight, they actually believe, they're not afraid to die, right? The Iraqi army ran away, left their weapons behind, and that's how ISIS has American weapons. It's not the first time we ended up doing that. That's sort of been a pattern. As Dave Smith would say, the lesson of 9/11 should be we should never fund or arm another rebel group in this part of the world again, because it always goes badly for us. Iraq, post-war, was not stable. And so regardless of what John Bolton says, he says we shouldn't have withdrew U.S. coalition forces. How is that a stable country if we need the United States military there for security? How do you think that's going to go and last as a long-standing country? Maliki wasn't a friend of the people. Come on. It wasn't stable at all, and so it fell to ISIS and allowed terror to spread to Syria eventually. And the part of Iraq that didn't fall totally to Sunni radicals like ISIS were the Kurds in the northwest, who we're friends with, which is good, and the Shia factions that are under control of Iran. So it's safe to say that Iran essentially owns Iraq now, guys. This is bipartisan accepted because of the Iraq war. So John Bolton, for someone who's so worried about Iran, how in 2015 are you still defending this Iraq war? It shouldn't even make sense logically to you. Someone who's so scared about Iran, and we're going to talk about Iran right now, because that's what John Bolton is really about, Iran. He desperately wants to bomb Iran, and that is not hyperbole. That is his words, okay? For example, and we have examples, don't worry. During the Iraq War in 2008, John Bolton thought it would be a good idea to bomb Iran and potentially widen this failing war. So not only should we keep fighting in Iraq and it's failing and the people don't like us, but we should actually attack Iraq's neighbor and extend the war and widen it against an even bigger population of radical people who hate us, right? Not that everyone in Iran's radical, but with the history of the United States and Iran, any attack on Iran, is going to get you giant blowback, huge. I'm not a fan of Iran by any stretch, okay? But how are you going to say in 2008 that we should just bomb the Shias flat out, man? It's like the argument that radicals use against the U.S. is that we're just all war hawks who don't actually care about poor brown people. We're just imperialists. How does starting a war with Iran help us? That was in 2008, but he's still very much an Iran hawk. Don't kid yourself, okay? And now, being an Iran hawk takes the form of being against the JCPOA, or as it's commonly known, the Iran nuclear deal. Now, I should say, I'm not a fan of Obama's foreign policy at all. I think there was a lot of blunders in Libya, the Red Line in Syria, Crimea, right? There are all these places Obama could have done better. I think the Iran deal isn't terrible. Am I pissed that Obama overlooked some things Iran was doing in funding Hezbollah, right? Yes, sure. But potential nuclear war is worse than smuggling money to Lebanon. Okay. And this isn't just the United States deal. Remember, I have a note right here to remind myself. The deal was signed by the UN P5+1. So Germany, France, UK, Britain, Russia, and the United States all signed this deal that they thought it was worthwhile to lower sanctions on Iran in exchange for some give and take on their nuclear program. Right, and so during the Iran nuclear deal, Iran cut 2/3 of their centrifuges, and now all of their nuclear sites are monitored by the International Atomic Energy Agency. They also filled their largest heavy water nuclear reactor at Iraq with concrete. And so Bolton doesn't like this because this deal essentially takes preemptive bombing Iran off the table. Right, because the truth is, Iran is not trying to get a bomb to nuke Israel. Okay? The mullahs are crazy, sure. Khomeini, insane, right? But Iran as a whole doesn't have a death wish. That's ridiculous. And Benjamin Netanyahu has been saying Iran is going to bomb Israel every 2 years for the past 25 years. So I think it's a little ridiculous. This is what Bolton had to say on the Iran nuclear deal right before it was signed. He wrote a post, and this is the title of the article: "To stop Iran, bomb Iran." Interesting, provocative title. Let's see what he says. Quote, "Time is terribly short, but a strike can still succeed. An attack need not destroy all of Iran's nuclear infrastructure, but by breaking key links in the nuclear fuel cycle, it could set back its program by 3 to 5 years. The United States could do a thorough job of destruction, but Israel alone can do what's necessary. Such action should be combined with vigorous American support for Iran's opposition aimed at regime change in Tehran. Because not only should the U.S. bomb Iran, but Israel should bomb Iran. That won't escalate into anything, will it?" Right now, I'm sure Israel bombs Iran, and then the rest of the Middle East is like, well, they were threatening them with nukes. And I love this little bit that if you read the article he throws in where, we need to attack Iran because they're funding terrorism. Yeah, to some extent, Iran funds terrorism. Agreed. Bad. But it's like, did you not just see Donald Trump hold up posters of our weapons deals to the Saudi Arabia, who are bombing poor, famine, and cholera-stricken children in Yemen? They're funding Wahhabist mosques around the world. Doesn't that sort of count as funding terrorism, at all? No, it doesn't. It's only terrorism when the other guy does it, but if we're going to make a little money out of the deal, then we'll keep it on the DL. So that's his gripe with Iran. And this gripe with Iran also extends to the other axis of evil, because that's where Bolton really focuses, right? Iran, Iraq, North Korea, to North Korea. And so less than a month ago, Bolton made the case in the fucking Wall Street Journal that the United States should preemptively bomb North Korea. Can we stop with the whole North Korea poses the greatest threat to the United States? Can we stop it? This is what John Bolton had to say about North Korea in that Wall Street Journal article. Preemption opponents argue that action is not justified because Pyongyang does not constitute an imminent threat. They are wrong. The threat is imminent, and the case against preemption rests on the misinterpretation of a standard that derives from pre-nuclear, pre-ballistic missile times. Given the gaps in U.S. intelligence about North Korea, we should not wait until the very last minute. That would risk striking after the North has deliverable nuclear weapons, a much more dangerous situation. End quote. So if you don't follow this closely, and if you're watching this video, I'm assuming you do, the reason North Korea wants a nuclear weapon isn't so they can just bomb the United States. The reason they want a nuclear weapon, and similar to the same reason Iran wants a nuclear weapon, is because they look at Iraq, they look at Libya, and they think having a nuclear weapon is the only way to solidify the regime. Now, I don't like that before these North Korea talks, Bolton is going to be whispering in Donald Trump's ear, should we just preemptive strike? I think if we just preemptive strike them, then maybe we could kill them all and get the regime. I don't like that. I think that's a bad idea. I think preemptive strike on North Korea, what it ends up in is a bunch of North Koreans who are radicalized against us, because that's all they've been told their entire lives. And you're going to end up with a lot of dead South Koreans, and those aren't lives that are ours to lose. Okay? It's one thing if America starts a war and they attack America. It's another thing if America starts a war and then bombs Seoul. Okay, that's not our duty. That's not our job. There are a lot of other quotes from Bolton you can find. The quotes I read from Bolton today are from this year, they're from 5 years ago, they're from 15 years ago, but you can find a plethora of similar things in between. And the lesson is, with John Bolton being appointed to National Security Advisor, is that no matter how much you were wrong, no matter how big the fuck up, Iran is as big a foreign policy blunder as you can make. Iraq. It doesn't matter. You aren't held accountable. They still let you write pieces for the Wall Street Journal. They'll still have you on Fox News and CNN as if your opinion should still be taken seriously. What price do people who have gotten it wrong over and over and over again have to actually pay? And the truth is, unfortunately, as we just found out with Bolton, is that you can actually be promoted to National Security Advisor. Thanks for watching, guys.